Once upon a time, in a small town in India, there lived a beautiful woman named Anjali. Anjali was a 25-year-old software engineer who had recently moved back to her hometown after completing her studies in a big city. She was known for her beauty, intelligence, and kindness, and she had won numerous awards for her academic and extracurricular achievements. One evening, Anjali had to stay late at the office to finish a project. As she left work, she realized that she had missed the last bus home. With no other option, she decided to take a private bus that was parked nearby. The driver and conductor of the bus seemed friendly enough, and Anjali boarded the bus, hoping to reach her destination safely. As the bus started moving, Anjali noticed that the driver and conductor were behaving strangely. They kept exchanging glances and smirking, and she could feel the tension in the air. But she tried to ignore it, thinking that she was just being paranoid. However, as the bus drove further, the driver and conductor became more and more aggressive. They started making lewd comments and catcalling Anjali, who was sitting alone in the bus. Anjali felt uncomfortable and scared, but she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the bus stopped in the middle of nowhere. The driver and conductor locked the doors and windows of the bus, trapping Anjali inside. They approached her, and the driver grabbed her, holding her tightly. The conductor began to undo his pants, and Anjali realized with horror that they planned to rape her. Anjali struggled and fought, but the driver was much stronger than her. He held her down while the conductor ripped off her clothes and forced himself on her. Anjali screamed and cried, but the sound of her pain was muffled by the driver's hand, which he had placed over her mouth. After the conductor was finished, the driver took his turn. He raped Anjali, and she could feel the pain and humiliation wash over her. When they were finally done, the driver and conductor left her alone on the bus, sobbing and bleeding. Anjali didn't know what to do. She was in shock and couldn't believe what had just happened to her. She felt dirty and violated, and the pain between her legs was unbearable. But she knew that she had to do something. She had to find a way to escape and get help. Using the last bit of her strength, Anjali managed to unlock the bus doors and crawl out. She stumbled through the darkness, searching for help. Eventually, she saw a light in the distance and made her way towards it. The light turned out to be a small police outpost. Anjali stumbled into the station, bleeding and half-naked. The police officers on duty were shocked to see her in such a state, and they immediately called for an ambulance. The police began an investigation, and they soon discovered that the driver and conductor had a history of sexual assault. They had been preying on young women in the area for years, but no one had ever dared to come forward and report them. Anjali was taken to the hospital, where she received treatment for her injuries. The doctors and nurses were gentle and kind, and they did everything they could to help her recover. But despite their efforts, Anjali was never the same again. The trauma of the assault haunted her, and she suffered from nightmares and flashbacks. She found it difficult to trust people, and her relationships with her friends and family were strained. The driver and conductor were eventually arrested and put on trial, but in a twist of fate, they were acquitted due to lack of evidence. Anjali was devastated, but she refused to give up. She became an advocate for sexual assault survivors, sharing her story and fighting for justice. And although she was never able to fully recover from the trauma of that fateful night, Anjali's courage and determination inspired others to speak out against sexual violence. Her story became a symbol of hope and resilience, reminding the world that even in the darkest of times, there is still a light that shines. The acquittal of the driver and conductor sent shockwaves through the community. People were outraged that such evil could go unpunished, and they began to demand change. Protests were held, and the media coverage of Anjali's story brought attention to the issue of sexual violence in India. Anjali became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring other sexual assault survivors to come forward and share their stories. She started a support group for survivors, where they could find solace and healing in the company of others who had experienced similar trauma. As the movement grew, the government was forced to take notice. New laws were introduced to better protect survivors of sexual assault, and the police were given training on how to handle such cases more sensitively and effectively. The judicial system was also reformed to ensure that survivors received fair and just treatment. With the new laws in place, Anjali decided to file a civil case against the driver and conductor, seeking damages for the emotional and physical harm they had caused her. The case dragged on for years, but eventually the court ruled in her favor, awarding her a substantial sum in damages. The driver and conductor were unable to pay the damages, and they were sent to prison to serve out their sentences. They spent the rest of their lives in jail, haunted by the crimes they had committed. Meanwhile, Anjali used the money she received from the civil case to start a foundation in her name. The Anjali Foundation aimed to provide support and resources to sexual assault survivors, as well as to educate the public about the importance of consent and the consequences of sexual violence. Anjali became a respected advocate and activist, traveling around the world to speak about her experiences and raise awareness about sexual assault. Her courage and resilience inspired countless people to take a stand against sexual violence and to support survivors in their journey towards healing and justice. In her personal life, Anjali found love and support in her partner, who stood by her side throughout